And just one final question for me. I just I don't know whether there's, when CHP was added for residential, commercial was left out, right, of the for net metering. And I just wondered if there was any thought given about whether that would help increase the market, or whether we're putting a hold on all, net metering because the rev is going on and we don't want to do anything like that.
I think the for us, it's as quickly as possible as we can get to the future where you have accurate pricing. The locational pricing value of distributed resources will be better, because it's going to become my refrain. The hardest thing to get to the future is the transition. And the more we put people on old pricing regimes, the harder it's going to be to get to that transition. So where we're looking for is support to get to a point where we can maximize the amount of distributed energy resources on the grid without forcing then customers, because if the net metering means that you're not fully allocating the cost, then you have more and more burden putting on people who can't afford CHP. And I don't think we want to end up there either.
So thank you. Do you have questions? Okay. Yeah, either way.
Good, thank you. Just a couple of questions. One of the issues, particularly for New York City, since we're sort of new to this conversation, I'm wondering whether or not the PSC has identified areas of the grid that may most benefit or has the most need for distributed energy?
The
distributed generation, sorry.
There's two areas we're doing that, working on that. The DSIP plans that the chair mentioned a few minutes ago, that are an order came out April 20th, and the utilities have to make a filing by the end of June, and they're supposed to, in that filing, identify the locations where distributed energy resources are most beneficial. At the same time, we're working simultaneously on some what we're calling heat maps of areas that also represent and show, on a good map where the best areas for distributed energy resources are. So it's kind of two efforts working in parallel, and they'll be coordinated with each other to make sure, we're not doing two separate things. But those are the things we're working on in the city and other areas of the state as well.
Mm-hmm. But there's one more I'll just add. The other thing we've asked the utilities to do is any time that they're looking at putting in a major investment, as I'm sure Assemblywoman Walker, you're aware of the Brooklyn Queens project.
Yes.
That's typical of what we're going to be asking utilities to do. And if you're putting in a major capital investment, one of the things we want you to ask yourself is, would it be cheaper and better to see more distributed resources that have the benefit of a cheaper alternative, but also helping consumers and helping maximize the amount of distributed energy resources we can use on the grid. So it's the planning, and then there's the actual, and then of course the third part is the pricing, getting the prices right so people get the right signals.
So one of the neighborhoods that I represent is Brownsville. So of course, which is a major hub for the BQDM project with the Brownsville substation.
Right.
One of the, I guess, sort of other questions that I have is, when we think about just different entities, whether it's multifamily buildings, or I do also have a large concentration, as we know, New York City, of public housing. And all of these different entities are exploring ways that they can sort of disconnect from the grid and employ more solar, more wind. And have we thought about perhaps when there are these residential units or other buildings that come off and there's a disaster that takes place, how are grids to be maintained? Because I'm sure by that point everyone's going to try to connect in and stay connected in, and just how do we sort of plan that out?
So I mean, there's these are sort of themes, but the idea of folks totally disconnecting from the grid, we would we think that the better approach is actually to remain connected to the grid, And while you might have power that you provide to yourself on blue sky days, is have the ability to use the grid if necessary in an emergency, and then have the grid be able to count on you for the resources that you provide, because it's now going to be a two-way system. And so what we're looking at in terms of, again, this is these standby charges, is making sure that you're not setting up barriers to people remaining connected to the grid. Having the utilities work with customers as well as third parties to help plan these systems. And the other area that we're very interested is community-based resources. So you've probably community aggregation is sort of the idea of communities getting together and buying supply, but we want them to get together and help plan these resources. So we are thinking about that. I think that as part of the BDQM, which is really one of it's a major initiative, and I think it's a great example of how we're hoping utilities can work with communities to think about what they might want to do. But the objective would be is that when people are doing a study on whether or not they want to fully disconnect or they want to remain connected and then just use their resources, maybe 90% of the time, but know the grid is there, making sure that's priced right. Does that, because I agree with you. You don't, you just, everyone, my experience is when you're in major outages, you just don't want to be there for a very long period of time. And we want to really think about this as we want to all pull together, and we want these resources because they could be good backups for the system, but the system also needs to be able to back them up, and that's where that partnership needs to occur.
Right. So one of the, I guess sort of, I know you mentioned a little community solar, which, we're really excited about. But from the conversations that we've had, or particularly that I've had with Con Edison, is that most of this solar that they're going to be employing are on their own buildings. So I don't know how much, community is actually involved in that. So I implore you to really, watch how that unfolds, as I'm sure we are as well. So one of the other sort of questions that I have is, how often are your standby rates adjusted? And particularly for, again, a community that, like I represent, which is a very low-income community, and also a community that has a number of seniors there. How are the rates adjusted as it relates to those two particular sort of vulnerable neighborhoods?
So there's actually two things that we're working on. We have in front of us, the Commission, another proceeding around low-income rate discounts. And so that is when a customer is buying, we want to make certain that we maintain an energy burden at an affordable rate for everyone. So staff has proposed to the Commission, and the proceeding is pending, so I can't discuss what the Commission's decision will be. They've proposed a standard that nobody in New York should pay more than 6% of their income for energy, and we need to look for ways to get there. So one piece is through rate discounts. The other is the Commission has said in the REV proceeding, particularly when it comes to low-income community where energy costs are so critical, where in other communities we will certainly want third parties to come in. This is an area we would expect utilities to work with low-income advocates, low-income communities, where we would invest essentially ratepayer money to reduce costs, because then it, of course, reduces the need for a discount, but also to put in distributed energy resources and socialize it through the rest of the utility rate base. And so the idea here is this is an opportunity really for utilities to think about how they can strategically invest in distributed resources and energy efficiency to serve a community, mitigate the need for rate discounts, and also, of course, address environmental justice issues, because it helps if we have load pockets, reduce congestion, et cetera. So that's the type of thing that we're hoping to get out of both the REV docket in itself, is for the utilities to step up. And then also in the Clean Energy Standard and Community Solar, we are doing allocations so that we make certain that the low-income communities continue to be provided. One of my concerns around the market development that we continue to talk about is that we know that when it came to telecommunications and the way internet policy evolved, people weren't really thinking about how pervasive the internet would be, and so we've developed this digital divide. What we talk about is we do not want an energy divide.
Right.
So in New York, we don't want a program of have and have-nots. And to the extent the market isn't going to be available for low-income communities, either for credit reasons or because they don't own their own homes, and it's multifamily housing or public housing, that's where we believe the utilities need to come in partnership, and where it's appropriate really for us to stay engaged and provide those programs.
Have there been any other states who have sort of, worked through this scenario already and that you're getting some guidance by? And what, if anything, have you learned from that?
There are states, certainly many states are looking at, how do we make certain that the most price-sensitive portions of the economy, whether it's low income or industrial, are addressed. But I would say that in these types of areas that we're talking about, New York is leading, and other states are actually watching us.
Okay, that much I'll agree with. So, again, thank you, chair people or chairpersons or chairwoman and chairman.
This is as awkward as it gets.
We are ombudspeople for the people. We've been joined by Charles Barron, member of the Economic Development Committee, and I think that Charles Barron, and another twofer, and he's got one or two questions.
Well, thank you very much and for this timely hearing. I wanted to, in East New York, we have apartment buildings that have some of the largest solar panels in the state, and we're continually encouraging developers to do that. Part of the challenges is around storage. The storage of the energy, the technologies that are needed to really store solar energy. So I wanted to ask you about that a little bit. And also some of the concerns I have for the homeowners who want to go to solar, the startup costs for the equipment that's needed to take advantage of it in low-income areas is a problem. And then lastly, I want to know more about geothermal energy, because I think if you really, we often talk about wind and solar, but the greater energy in the earth is geothermal energy. And I know there are some programs out on geothermal energy, but the combination of those three sources of energy can really reduce the reliance on coal or oil or nuclear or other kinds of energy that is more hazardous to the planet.
So beginning with storage. Okay, so one of the things that we're well aware of is as we develop and we achieve our objectives in the state around renewable energy, the advantage of renewable energy, of course, is the fact that it's zero fuel and it's clean. The disadvantage is the fact that it's variable. Solar is only available when the sun shines. Wind is only available when the wind blows. And so the question is, since we use electricity all the time, how do we back that up? One of the ways that we can back that up is through storage. And so we believe very much so in the Commission that we need to continue to look at pricing policies to take advantage of the values that storage technologies like batteries, backup batteries, can provide to the system. So before you came in, I talked a little bit about we have a proceeding going on to fully value distributed energy resources on the grid. One of the reasons we're doing this is to make certain that we can value what storage can provide, not just in terms of energy, but actually support for the system because it's very fast reacting. I would also note that the federal government has started a proceeding and is asking the New York ISO to file what tariff changes it should make at the wholesale level to value storage better, because you can even use storage, like if you think about a large wind farm. You can put the batteries right there, and then when it comes into the grid, it can come in firm. And so what kind of policies need to basically effectuate that? So I would say both us and Federal Energy Regulatory Commission are seeing that. I personally think that storage is a huge boom for to change this energy industry, because that's really what's been lacking. So that, I hope that addresses your issue. And then you see inventors like Tesla coming up with new storage technologies for the home, which I think are terrifically exciting. In terms of low income, as I mentioned, we're working in almost every area, whether it's the Clean Energy Fund, whether it's the work that Green Bank is doing, whether it's the work that the utilities are doing, to ensure that as we move forward with REV and as we move forward to changing the nature of our energy system, that low-income folks, whether it's in making sure their systems or their homes are more efficient, or they have access to clean energy, that is where regulation or government continues to play, because we do not want to say, well, just let the market do it, when we know that there are areas of our economy that the markets will be later, and so the government needs to stay engaged. And so we have, in almost every proceeding, a specific directive to make sure that their low-income communities are included. For example, when we improved community solar, we said that for the first set of projects, they all had to have a percentage allocated to low-income homeowners or low-income apartment dwellers.
But how does the low-income families afford the startup equipment?
Well, the programs that we were looking at are programs really where the developer takes the startup and the savings goes to the low income. So it is essentially, in a simple way, is you're leasing your home and you get the value of the resource, so there are no startup costs. And really in this model, and I'm sure there are others who can talk a bit more about it, a lot of the value of solar is in the tax credits.
Right.
And so the ownership model allows for it to be tax efficient too, because many of the homeowners really can't use the level of tax credits.
Right.
We wish we all could, but sometimes we just can't.
And geothermal?
Geothermal, I think, is a untapped resource for the state. We're doing several things about that. We're actually, there's a wonderful geothermal project in Long Island that American Water did at a school, that they did as a pilot, where basically they tapped into their own system. This is a water company, and they're basically able to chill and heat the school using geothermal at a fraction of the costs that the school was paying. The other advantage to this is this was a school without air conditioning, and so as we all remember, long time ago, when we would sit in classes in May and June, how miserable it was, or September, now the teachers are finding that they're able to engage students better because you don't have these temperature swings in the building. But the other point is now they can use the school all summer as a place for summer school, because they have a cooling system. So this is just sort of one example. So one of the things that we're looking at is even working with our gas utilities, is to begin urging them. There are areas of the state where we don't have natural gas infrastructure, where to use geothermal for heating as opposed to natural gas. So to me, the trick on geothermal is getting that model right. And I see opportunities for our gas utilities, our electric utilities, and our water companies to start thinking about this resource as a really untapped resource. So if you think about it, all geothermal is really the solar in the water.
Basically.
So it's solar energy from the ground, because it has the same effect. Right. It's the effect of cooling and chilling water.
What school is that on Long Island?
I will tell you the name. I should know it. Do you remember it? Yeah, we'll get it for you.
And that's the American Water Company?
American Water, and they would love to show it to you. It's a very neat project, and they want to do more.
Thank you.
Sure.
So I have a couple of follow-up questions. Robin, do you have any? Yeah? Oh, okay. Just in terms of when you going forward and you're looking after the moratorium, I guess the first thing is there an intent to make the utilities whole? There's going to be a 4-year hold on or is it just we're gonna expect them to eat that?
No, I mean, very quickly, no, utilities, I mean, we have to allow them to recover their investment, so it's not a loss to the utilities, it's an allocation to other customers, to the extent that there's under recovery of expenses.
So when we develop, so the 4 years is really just to establish the long-term standby rates? I mean, I guess I'm not understanding the benefit of 4 years, if we're going to be loading the customers up later on with the cost.
It wouldn't be the same customers. The 4 years was a way to jumpstart the market while we were looking at a more permanent solution. So this was something that was negotiated with with a number of the developers as a means to get this started. The goal is to replace that program with the full program. And
I guess the only reason would be concerned about it is, you yourself said that, most of these kinds of buildings are going to be going on, projects are a 20-year investment. They're not a 4-year investment. They're 20 years. So they're going to be paying standby charges for the 16 of their 20 years. And if the cost is loaded at that end and not predictable, I just wondered, if it's a real economic incentive, or has it been an economic incentive? That's the better question. Have we seen CHP grow because of, and farm waste generation grow because of the 4-year moratorium on standby charges?
we have seen customers, that in the process themselves were appreciative of the change in the rate design to allow them to get on the standard delivery rates. The objective moving forward is to take a look at the fact that if there are customers who are putting in CHP and it's highly reliable and they're able to schedule the maintenance, is then they are not, the utility really isn't standing by for them during peak. And then can we continue this as a program ad infinitum? This was a way to give us time to study it so that we can come up with a permanent program that works for the customers and is fair to all customers.
So just in developing the standby rate, are factors like economic development in specific areas, for example, we need more farms in New York, so, generating, if farm waste generation is an incentive to doing that, it's a good thing. Commercial development in certain regions of the state. I just didn't know whether economic factors are going to be considered at all. Environmental factors, for example, it's cleaner, so are we going to give credit for that? So it just maybe you can elaborate a little bit on what some of the kinds of factors are, or is it just simply, rate-based analysis?
Well, one of the things that the Commission did last year is we enacted a benefit cost analysis approach for looking at when you're making rate decisions and making investment decisions. Part of that benefit cost analysis approach actually requires requires utilities to consider the environmental effects and as well as some economic effects of the decision. So we are trying to get there. I think looking at economic effects is sort of a challenge. As you know, NYSERDA does look at economic impacts when it does its auctions, because we like to make certain that we're looking at the full cost and full value of resources. In this instance, the objective in terms of the name of the school, in this instance, our goal will be, I think, to make certain that we're not putting in barriers. So you're exactly right. If there's a positive environmental impact, that ought to be considered in thinking about, this is a way for us to hit our clean energy goals. Let's make certain that we're not erecting a barrier to getting there.
And the final question, where we see more CHP is regionally, where is it growing?
We generally see more CHP in the city.
The city.
And it's, one of the areas that's growing is with smaller CHP units. We're seeing more of them than we saw 5 years ago.
Like small commercial buildings?
Yes.
Yeah.
So how big?
100 kW, 200 kW, we're seeing those kind as well. There's still also big ones.
They're going into what type of commercial building?
I don't exactly know the type of building, but they're smaller buildings, not these Manhattan-type buildings. But I know you have a Con Edison person on the panel. You could ask him.
Which person?
We have a panel.
You have a panelist from Con Edison.
Exactly.
He can give you specific type buildings.
And I think that wraps
Yeah.
it up, except for the name of the school from Mr. Barron.
It is the Valley Stream Elementary School.
We'll do an energy committee site visit.
They will be delighted. And I have to shout out for my co-commissioner, Patty Akampora, because she actually has been pushing this project along, and she made it happen. So,
Great.
thank you.
Great. Thank you so much, really. Thank you.
Give her our best. Thank you.
Next.
Chairperson Paulin says we are going on now to the next panel, which is a utility panel. And there are three presenters in that panel, John, Matthew, and Raymond. John Gavin, Matthew Ketchke, and Raymond Kinney. Mr. Gavin is the Vice President for Electrical Systems Engineering at National Grid, an expert on inverters, I might add. Matthew Ketchke is the Vice President for Distributed Energy Integration at Con Ed, and Raymond Kinney is the Director for Transmission Services for NYSEG, Rochester Gas and Electric. Gentlemen,